Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. This is a chronology from Maximilien Rubel and Margaret Manale's Marx Without Myth, a chronological study of his life and work. This chronology is about the social context of Marx's life between his birth in 1818 and 1843, when he would have been, 25 years old. This is kind of, like I said, this is about his context. So it's not about Marx himself. It's about the world that he was living in at the time. It's about the 19th century. Okay. So, Central and Western Europe, 1818. At the Holy Congress of Aix-la-Chapelle, the four powers of the Holy Alliance, Russia, Britain, Prussia, and Austria, sign a convention committing themselves to joint action to prevent a revival of Jacobinism in France. During the Congress, the British socialist Robert Owen petitions the assembled heads of state to adopt his plan of agricultural industrial cooperative communities, arguing that growing industrial production is bound to lead to social and economic disaster. The German Länder of Baden and Bavaria grant constitutional forms of representation to their populations. 1819. At the Conference of Karlsbad, Austria, the delegates of the German Confederation, Bund, ratify a series of measures the purposes of which is to suppress revolutionary turmoil, especially that generated by the patriotic student societies, and to enforce rigid censorship of the press. A peaceable demonstration is held at St. Peter's Field, Manchester, England, in protest against the insufferable conditions of the industrial working class. The unarmed demonstrators are brutally attacked by yeomanry and reserve cavalry. Later in the year, the police, thus initiated by these police measures, is reconfirmed in the passage of the Six Acts, directed against sedition and radicalism. 1820. A military insurgency in southern Italy, supported by the secret society of revolutionary conspirators known as Carbonari, achieves its goal in forcing the King Ferdinand I to promulgate a national constitution. This provokes the powers of the Holy Alliance to call the Congress of Laibach, where it is agreed that Austria should invade Italy in order to provide a pretext for restoring the earlier absolutist government. Austria occupies Naples for 3 years, while the king takes vengeance by imprisoning or sentencing to death hundreds of liberals and Carbonari. 1822. At the Congress of Verona, another scheme is produced by the Russian Tsar, Austria's Prince Metternich, and the French diplomat Chateaubriand, whereby France is charged with waging war against Spain should there be no retraction of Spain's liberal constitution of 1812. This Congress marks the separation of Britain from the other partners in the alliance. France then invades Spain, abolishes the constitution, and restores the absolutist King Ferdinand VII to the throne. The king revives the Inquisition and orders the prosecution of all connected with the liberal constitution. So that happens between 1822 and 1823. 1824. Trade unions are legalized in Great Britain and laws are passed permitting both coalitions and strikes. 1828. Protestant dissenters in England are granted civil liberties. 1829. The Catholic Emancipation Act is passed permitting Catholics to hold a seat in the British Parliament. 1830. Catholic Belgium is declared independent of Protestant Holland. The July Revolution, also in 1830, the July Revolution in France results from a collision between the monarch and the ever-growing number of liberal elements. In a show of power to quieten the opposition, King Charles X conducts a victorious war of conquest against Algeria. Then, counting on his military success to produce the necessary support, he dissolves the Chamber of Deputies and issues the so-called 5 ordinances, which would make the electoral law a privilege of the richest landowners and abolish the freedom of the press. Republican Paris revolts, declares the king deposed, and proclaims the Republic. Parliament offers the crown of constitutional monarch to the Duke of Orleans, who becomes the, quote, citizen king, Louis-Philippe I. 1831. Joseph Mazzini, a participant in the Carbonarist uprising, founds the Young Italy movement in order to arouse popular support for national unity in the struggle against the papacy and Austria. Mazzini advocates the expulsion of Austria through a mass insurgency, the abolition of papal influence in temporal affairs, and the establishment of a democratic Italian republic. 1832. The British Parliament approves the Reform Bill, which makes representation more, quote, democratic and extends the franchise in the boroughs to households with a minimum income of £10. Also in 1832. In Germany, a revolutionary appeal to arms is made by students and intellectuals gathered at the castle of Hambach for a festival. The Prussian government answers this provocation with renewed political reprisals. 1823 to 1833. A cholera epidemic brought in from Asia breaks out and causes many thousands of deaths in England, France, and Germany. In 1833, all of Bohemia is touched by the ravages of this disease. 1833, a tariff union, Zollverein, is established among the German Länder. Also in 1833, the government of Louis Philippe in France passes an Education Act which is intended to establish state-aided primary schools in every community. 1833, civil war erupts in Spain and Portugal over the question of a liberal constitution. Unrest lasts until 1840 and causes Spain to lose her colonies and all overseas resources except Cuba and the Philippines. Also 1833, the British Parliament passes a Factory Act regulating conditions for the employment of young people in textile factories, instituting inspectors to enforce the law. Also 1833, Robert Owen launches in England a plan for communist production to be realized through the Grand National Consolidated Trade Union. About 500,000 working men and women join this organization, which, however, soon dies away for lack of a clear program and financial means. 1833, Britain sets an example to the Western world by passing a law prohibiting slave trade and slavery in its territories. 1834, Mazzini founds the, quote, Young Europe movement in Germany, Poland, and Switzerland. 1834, the Whig Poor Law in England reforms the system of relief aid and reorganizes the workhouses. 1834, after the French government passes a law restricting the rights of association, Mazzini succeeds in inciting the working men of Lyon to revolt, and the uprising spreads throughout the country. The massacre of the Rue Transnonain illustrates the brutality of the government troops who suppress these outbreaks. In protest against such reprisals, new secret societies are organized. Auguste Blanqui founds the Société des Familles, whose immediate purpose is military action, later reconstituting it as Société des Saisons. In 1847, German refugees in Paris found the League of the Banished, which is renamed League of the Just in 1836 and is a forerunner of the Communist League. 1838. General discontent with the 1932 Reform Bill and with the present system of trade unionism in England manifests itself in the Chartist movement. William Lovett and Francis Place draw up a 6-point People's Charter which serves as the movement's political platform. The Chartists demand 1. Adult male suffrage, 2. Secret balloting, 3. Abolition of property qualifications for members of Parliament, and 4. Payment for their terms in office, 5. Annual general elections, and 6. Equal electoral districts. 1839. Agitation also begins in England for the repeal of the restrictive corn laws. Richard Cobden establishes the Anti-Corn Law League, and there are popular demonstrations in support of its free trade policy. 1840. After expulsion from France for participation in a Blancist conspiracy, German immigrants in London found a workers' educational society. 1842. The British Parliament passes a bill limiting the labor of women and children in the mines but rejects the Chartist petition. Between 1842 and 1845, Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel passes a series of liberal budgets which reintroduce income tax and establish a sliding scale of duties on corn. 1843. The Irish demonstrate for the repeal of the Act of Union. Home rule becomes the cry of Catholic Ireland and of her representative in Parliament, Daniel O'Connor. In Spain, a military junta assumes power in Barcelona, proclaiming Isabella queen and ending the military regency of General Espartero. New section. Eastern Europe and the Middle East. 1821 to 29. The Greek War of Independence develops out of popular resistance to Turkish hegemony and the repressive treatment of Christians by the Muslims. 1822. The Turks massacre over 20,000 Greeks on the island of Chios. However, the Holy Alliance denies any official international aid to the threatened people who are considered to be insurgents. 1825. Russia's childless Tsar Alexander I dies, and his succession becomes a matter of prolonged dispute. With the support of the secret societies, the Russian army stages a revolt, hoping to call a national assembly and establish a constitution. This mutiny, the Decembrist uprising, is rapidly quelled and the throne assumed by Nicholas I. The Tsar now sends aid to the Greek Christians. Eventually, France and England follow suit. The London Treaty guaranteeing protection for the Greeks is signed jointly by all three countries, who subsequently send military and naval forces to Turkey. At Navarino Bay, the Turkish fleet is destroyed by Allied sea power. It's kind of hard to follow this because it has these dates on the side, but it's all one paragraph, so I don't know when I'm supposed to start saying it's 1829, not 1825, but let's just say 1829, at Navarino Bay, the Turkish fleet is destroyed by Allied sea powers. Hostilities end with the conclusion of the Treaty of Adrianople, which recognizes the independence of Greece. Russia receives the territories south of the Caucasus in Asia and the islands of the Danube Delta and is proclaimed protector of the Sultan's Christian subjects. The Straits of Constantinople and the Dardanelles are open to free merchant shipping. 1830, Republican sentiments begin to threaten the hegemony of the Russian Tsar in Poland, where an uprising leads to his dethronement by proclamation of the Polish Parliament. So 1831, Russian troops invade the country and force the patriotic troops to retreat. Government and parliament flee, while the Tsar revokes the Constitution of 1815 and proceeds to govern Poland henceforth as a Russian province. 1833, with the secret treaty of Unkiar-Skelessi between Russia and Turkey, the latter agrees to close the Dardanelles to all ships except the Russian in case of war, thus rendering the Straits of Russian stronghold. Russia in turn promises to support the port in case of conflict with Egypt. 1839, hostilities break out between the Turkish Sultan and his Egyptian vassal. Anglo-French intervention prevents Russia from exploiting the dispute. 1840, a quadripartite alliance of England, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, excluding France, who supported the Egyptian cause, negotiates a settlement which represents a diplomatic defeat for the French. To offset this, France demands the return of the West Rhine provinces from Germany. The matter is ultimately settled by a five-nation conference held in London, where the Dardanelles Treaty is concluded. Henceforth, the slave trade is prohibited, and the Bosporus and Dardanelles are closed to all ships of war. New section, the Far East. 1839, the First Opium War begins with the Chinese authorities vainly protest against the British opium trade by destroying the stocks of opium in Canton. 1841, a British Navy victory permits the colonialists to declare Hong Kong a British possession. Hostilities continue until the superior forces of the British compel the Chinese to agree to the terms of peace stipulated in the Treaty of Nanking. Britain is accorded the right to trade in opium at 4 ports in addition to Canton and paid an indemnity of $21 million. 1841-42. The First Anglo-Afghan War begins when the British attempt to take possession of Afghanistan, buffer territory between India and Russia. The British resident is slain and thousands on both sides lose their lives before the colonial power emerges victorious. In 1843, at the same time, British troops subdue the rulers of Sindh and annex the strategic passageway to India. New section, Scientific and Technological Progress. 1820, André Ampère presents a new theory of magnetism as electricity in motion, thus founding the science of electrodynamics. 1826, Nicephore Niepce produces the first true photograph, a heliogravure. 1830, The first railway line is opened between Manchester and Liverpool. Also in 1830, Barthélemy Monnier takes out a patent in France for the invention of the sewing machine. 1831, Michael Faraday discovers the generation of electric currents by means of magnets. This phenomenon comes to be called electromagnetic induction. 1832, the American Joseph Henry, working independently on electromagnetic phenomenon, discovers self-induction. 1833, Carl Friedrich Gauss and Wilhelm Weber in Germany used electromagnetism to effect the first long-distance telegraphic communication. 1834, Cyrus McCormick patents the first horse-drawn mechanical reaping machine in the USA. 1838, Faraday formulates a coherent process for his theory of electricity. 1839, Louis Daguerre, an associate of Niepce, carries on and perfects the latter's work with the construction of the first photographic apparatus known as the daguerreotype. Also 1839, the German Baron Justus von Liebig marks the founding of the science of agrochemistry with the publication of his book on chemistry applied to agriculture. And the next section is important works published. Some are read by Marx and some are presumably read. Some are probably not read. 1819, David Ricardo, Principles of Political Economy, read. L.S. de Sismondi, Principe d'économie politique, read. Arthur Schopenhauer, Die Welt als Wille und Vorstellung, not read. 1821, G.F.W. Hegel, Grundlinien der Philosophie des Rechts, read. Claude-Henri de Saint-Simon, Du Système Industriel, read. 1825, Claude-Henri de Saint-Simon, Le Nouveau Christianisme, read. 1828, Ludwig Gall, Philanthropische Blätter, not read. Philippe Buonarroti, La Conspiration pour l'égalité dite des bouffes, read. 1829, François Guizot, Histoire générale de la civilisation en Europe, read. Charles Fourier, Le Nouveau Monde industriel et sociétaire, read. 1830 to 1845, Georg von Gulich, Geschichtliche Darstellung des Handels, des Gewerbes und des Ackerbaus, read. 1830 to 42, Auguste Comte, Cours de philosophie positive. 1831, L.J.A. de Pater, Les Révolutions à faire. 1833, Heinrich Heine, Französische Zustände, read. Thomas Hamilton, Men and Manners in America, read. 1834, Georg Büchner, Der Hessische Bote, not read. Félicité de Lemene, Parole d'un crayon, probably read, or presumably read. 1835, D.F. Strauss, Das Leben Jesu, which I think is the life of Jesus, which is probably read. 1835 to 40, Alexis de Tocqueville, De la démocratie en Amérique, read. 1836, Charles Fourier, La fausse industrie morcelée, read. Thomas Robert Malthus, An Inquiry into the Nature and Progress of Rent, not read. 1836 to 38, Victor Considerant, Destinée sociale, not read. 1836 to 44, Robert Owen, The Book of the New Moral World, read. 1837, H.C. Carey, Principes d'économie politique, read. L.S. de Sismondi, Études sur l'économie politique, read. G.W.F. Hegel, Vorlesungen über die Geschichte der Philosophie, read. 1837 to 39, Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, read. 1838, Wilhelm Weitling, Die Menschheit, wie sie ist und wie sie sein sollte, read. Louis Blanc, Organisation du Travail, read. J.F. Bray, Labor's Wrongs and Labor's Remedies, read. August Tchaikovsky, Prolegomena sur historiosophie, presumably read. 1840, Pierre Leroux, Les humanités de la humanité, de son principe et de son avenir, read. Etienne Cabet, Voyage in Icary, presumably read. Eugène Bouret, de la misère des classes laborieuses en Angleterre et en France, read. P.J. Proudhon, Qu'est-ce que la propriété, read. Friedrich List, Das Nationalsystem der politischen Ökonomie, read. Moses Hess, Die europäische Triarchie, read. Ludwig Feuerbach, Das Wesen des Christentums, Das Wesen des Christentums, read. Théodore Desailly, M. Lamennais, réfuté par lui-même, read. 1841 to 44, Louis Blanc, Révolution française, Histoire des 10 ans. 1842, Weitling, Garantien der Harmonie und der Freiheit, read. Lorenz Stein, Sozialismus und Kommunismus des heutigen Frankreichs, read. Théodore Desailly, Code de la Communauté. Constantin Piquer, that last Desailly was read. Constantin Piquer, Théorie nouvelle d'économie sociale et politique, read. 1843, Flora Tristan, La Union ouvrière, read. Wilhelm Schultz, Die Bewegung der Production, read. Bruno Bauer, Das entdeckte Christentum, read. Bruno Bauer, Die Judenfrage, read. The Jewish Question. Marquis de Custine, La Russie in 1839, read. Soren Kierkegaard, Enter Eller, Either Or, not read. George Sand, Jan Ziska, Épisode de la guerre des Hussites. Jean Ziska, Épisode de la guerre des Hussites. Red. George Sand, Jean Ziska, Épisode de la guerre des not red. Victor, considérant principe du socialisme, manifeste de la démocratie, something in the 19th century. Presumably red. Okay, so that's the end. I apologize for that last page or two where I was trying to pronounce all these words that I have no business trying to pronounce. Thanks for listening.